Thank you, John. And it's just so wonderful to be here together. It is really such a joy to have this time with you. I'm here with my mum, Mary, who I happened to be visiting this weekend. And when Stephen got in touch with me to see could I come and join you at your annual meeting. I'm very involved in eco-congregations in Ireland. So the sister organisation of Eco-Congregation Scotland, and which really looks to the Scottish eco-congregations for so much inspiration and on how to grow this movement also ecumenically. So the world we know today, and I don't need to tell you this, is in profound crisis. Whether it's climate change, biodiversity loss, the growing social inequality, which is really kind of fueled now by this cost of living crisis, which is really a crisis, an energy crisis and an inflationary crisis, which expresses itself as cost of living. And we've many names for this crisis. We call it the fork in the road, the edge of the cliff, the point of no return, the planetary tipping point. Everything around us today is speaking to the fact, screaming out to us actually, that human activity, both in its scale, its speed, and its form, is leading to systematic breakdown, the breaching of planetary limits, and the sure decline of life support systems that enable us to live together on this planet. There's no doubt that we're alive at an extraordinary moment in history, and we're facing the scale of the transformation that needs to happen. At this critical moment, to help us break out of the destructive logic and to foster a more integrated approach, we, as people of faith, need to be prepared to dig deep and to appeal to the richness that comes from the narratives of faith. We are so blessed to have treasures within our faiths that can help us to overcome the logic and the destruction we see all around us today. So in my reflection, I'd like to offer a brief reflection rooted in faith, given that it's still Easter season within the Christian traditions. And this is to ask, what has the mystery of death and resurrection to say to us today in the face of this complex crisis, which Pope Francis so beautifully calls the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor? What place has that mystery of death, resurrection, rebirth to do with an integrated approach to addressing the crises we see and the potential solutions? I think that the Easter mysteries, first and foremost, give us a sense to place ourselves. Where are we in this story? It feels to me like we're living in the Holy Saturday of human experience. Good Friday is dominated by the logic of materialism, which tells us, or the consequences of Good Friday tells us it's all over. The demise of humanity is now set in stone. It was nailed to a cross. The planet, due to our sins and the sins of our forebears, is sealed. There's so much violence around us, so much death and darkness. There's a kind of inevitability to Good Friday. Holy Saturday is marked by sadness. It's marked by disillusionment and confusion. It's like the in-between space where we can't yet see the full promise of hope, where we struggle to still believe and imagine that another future is truly possible. We want to believe, but we're unsure. In this time of planetary suspense, this Holy Saturday calls out to us in profound ways. Above all, it calls on us to reconnect with the earth and to rediscover the patterns of death and resurrection that are imprinted in nature. They're in the very matter of the material world. That historical story of resurrection may have happened once, but the story of the universal Christ, the story of the new cosmology, the story of nature itself speaks to us of resurrection. Everything in nature becomes something else. It's amazing, isn't it? When you look around and you see the trees in winter, and then suddenly the miracle of the blossom. Everything comes from something and into something. There's a wondrous sacredness. And we know this. These panels speak of the precious nature. Each of us, we know, will eventually cease to be and become something resurrected, someone resurrected. That pattern underpins human existence and planetary health in profound ways we're only now starting to piece together, to stitch together. Echoes of this profound logic, moreover, this deep story, are in every faith. That's the extraordinary thing. When you start to delve into the other faith stories, there's a common thread. And if this is true, and it's evident in nature, what does this logic of rebirth have to say in our economy? Surely the economy, which if you go back right down to the root of the word, oikonomia, it means household management. And I have to say in parentheses, I'm always struck that women get that. And the women economists, like Kate Raworth and the ones that are coming through now, really get that idea of household management as economy. So should the oikonomia, the economy, surely bears that profound hallmark of death and resurrection. So it begs the question for us, what does a resurrected economy look like? What does a regenerated, that's the other word we could use, and we hear that, regenerated, regenerative economy look like? What does it mean to be invested in? I prefer that rather than to invest in. To be invested in a regenerative economy and planet. On the ashes of the current economy, which is so marred by an extractivism, an extractive logic of individual consumption, waste, greed, we can already see the signs of this emerging resurrected economy. We can see green shoots which embody the logic of a new regenerative economy, which is more akin, it's more rooted in the patterns of death and resurrection, in cycles of life, in abundance that mark existence. The first signs of the dawn of Easter Sunday are already very clear on the horizon. We see these signs in the growing, diverse movements for circular economy, for agroecology, for clean and renewable forms of energy, for slow food and seasonality, for social enterprises, for cooperatives, for solidarity economics. And you could start to go on. When you start to look, you can see them. All of these facets of a new nature-based economy are emerging in every corner of the world, from the grassroots, supported by faiths, supported by movements like the Economy of Francesco, which, if you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's an incredible network of young economists, thousands of them, who are now studying to become economists for a regenerative economy, the policymakers of the future. It's seen in the slow food movement, the Buen Vivir movement, the donut economy, the well-being economy alliance. It's often led by young people who are unencumbered by old, fragmented ways of seeing and ways of doing. And this can offer a glimpse of a compelling vision of a renewed, integrated approach to an economy in balance with nature and with human needs. There's an urgency now to breathe life, to breathe energy, labour, land, finances into these emerging prophetic economic ideas and projects at all levels. It's a time for bold hope and vision. We as individuals and people of faith are called to live into that future. And I believe that faith communities and organisations like eco-congregations, together with all the world's faiths, have a major leadership role to play in bringing this resurrected, regenerative economy to life. Like in the past, great leaders saw the needs of society. Great faith leaders, they saw the needs of society and went forth to create something from what was not there. We need groups now who have that creative spirit, and it is so amazing to see that here, because this is the future. This is the future. But there's a need now to bring this kind of regeneration to scale. There is an urgent need for new forms of nature-based and people-centred finance, and particularly new investing instruments that enable these forms of economy that truly address the needs of nature and human flourishing to grow and multiply. Joanna Macy, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, the inspirational environmentalist and writer and campaigner, she's a beautiful writer, it speaks of the times we're living in as potentially overwhelming, and us all trying to find what bit of it we're trying to do and make sense of at this time. She says we're living in a time where there are three kind of energies emerging, happening kind of all simultaneously. And we need to engage with all of them in order to build a future of hope. When she talks of these three moments or three energies, she's talking of the death of the old system. So we're seeing almost like the sunsetting of the old way of doing things, the old economy. We're seeing the great turning, which is the emergence, the transition into something new. And we're also seeing in a sense, the signs of what is new, the first signs of this new way of coexisting and a new economy. For each of these, we need to have a different strategy to engage. And we can see that already in the climate movement and in society. In terms of the dying, we need to divest and we need to resist. We need to have damage limitation from what is happening, as many are doing right across the world today. I was so moved yesterday, I'm sure you saw the video of all the goings on down in London in Christian Climate Action. We're joined by people from all different faith groups, and they had a wonderful service they had 1,000 people inside, and it was full to overflowing. People were all outside and they couldn't get into the service. And then afterwards they processed very slowly, peacefully to the Shell building, and they sang Amazing Grace. It was, look it up on Twitter, it's quite powerful. It gives you shivers, because the power of faith is the power to change the story. It's the power to change the story. And it's amazing to see that faith groups are finding their voice, literally finding this beautiful voice. But that's resistance. We need to resist. That's the pictures. We need to resist, and we need to divest from what is causing the damage. In terms of turning then, this great turning, we need to acknowledge that there are people who will suffer from the change. And we need to put in place the support structures to enable a transition to happen. And that's challenging because we cannot go back. So there's a great need to build unity and to build collaboration and to address the needs of those who are in the front line of a just transition. And in terms of the new emergence, we need to breathe life, as I said, into those signs of hope that are emerging, what is authentic that's emerging to address the climate and the cost of living crisis. When it comes to investments, faith groups are already at the forefront of value-led investments, having built up over centuries unparalleled assets. If you just think about the power, the assets that faiths have, the Christian faiths, but then add on all the other faiths as well, it is very substantial. Those assets are in the form of finances, so investments, banking, who we bank with, infrastructure, land, and buildings. There's one statistic that says that faith communities own outright or have direct management over 12% of the world's landmass. That's significant. But we could go on about the assets. But faiths are working on divestment from fossil fuels. That's about resistance to what is old, we're getting out of. And just yesterday, another 31 faith institutions announced their commitment to divest from fossil fuels. Faiths are also in the forefront of engaging with shareholders to ensure that companies live up to their climate commitments. They've been at the forefront of the science-based targets movement in terms of getting a change within the investment world and putting questions of socially responsible investment and ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, much more central in the investment world. Whilst this is significant, it is certainly not enough at this point. What is needed now, alongside all of this work to reform the financial world and the investment world, is a new spirit of collective action to construct a new financial system, a new financial architecture to enable the new economy, that resurrected economy, to emerge. We need to urgently get the capital, the right kinds of capital, to those people and institutions who are actively building that new economy. This has to happen as the old economy is deconstructed. But you need to start to build, and the faiths are so well positioned with the networks and the institutions and the values and the vision to do that. The old will collapse at some stage because it's founded on falsehoods and false realities. It's founded on a myth of infinite growth. But the new has to be co-created and constructed, and that's the moment that we're in. The new has to be constructed, and we need to collaborate with so many different groups and people to do that. So in conclusion, we need to emerge from the empty tomb, full of bold hope. We need to recognize that our circles of influence, our structures in our faith communities, we have significant assets that can be put to work to build that new economy which speaks of regeneration and resurrection. We need to carve out the spaces and build the alliances that are necessary to generate the collective will at all different levels, which is essential to making that promise of regeneration a reality. As Pope Francis said in Laudato Si, and I'll finish with this, an authentic humanity calling out for a new synthesis seems to dwell in the midst of our technological culture, almost unnoticed, like a mist seeping gently beneath a closed door. Will the promise last, in spite of everything, with all that is authentic rising up in stubborn resistance? Thank you.